everybody. So happy to have you all at the Speakeasy. Again, what an amazing crowd. You guys are awesome. Thank you. I know that you're here not to hear from me, but rather our incredible guest lineup, so don't let me keep you waiting. I want to go ahead and introduce my colleague, Nick Vinegar. He's going to be sitting down with somebody who needs no introduction to this crowd, Fogh Rasmussen, for a candid conversation over the next 20 minutes, so please give them a round of applause. Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here. Of course, Fogh Rasmussen, former Prime Minister of Denmark, 12th Secretary General of NATO, and founder of the Copenhagen Democracy Summit.
And Rasmussen Global, yes.
And Rasmussen Global. Let's get right into it, because we have a flood of news these days. We've got drone activity over the Baltic states, and we also have some news from the United States. They've made some announcements about winding down troops, withdrawing troops from some EU countries. I just have to ask off the bat, what do you think about the timing of these announcements? Does this not in some way benefit Vladimir Putin in this war that we're fighting, that the United States is lowering its posture here? Mm.
Yes, I mean, Putin is laughing. 4,000 American troops deployment to Poland is scrapped.
Right.
5,000 troops in Germany withdrawn. A missile unit that was supposed to be deployed to Germany has been cancelled. And in January and months before, we saw a threat from Trump against an ally, Denmark, with the aim to grasp Greenland by force. I mean, these actions, these statements are bad, and the timing is extremely bad. So Putin, he may be happy.
Yeah, I was worried I was going to get a mealy-mouthed response, but not from you. But what do you think of the rationale here? Because when we hear from the United States, it's about pivoting to Asia. But then we hear comments that are not very strong on the Asia theater as well. So do you think there's a strategy or a rationale, or what's your interpretation of why this is happening?
There's definitely no strategy. But I agree that the real geopolitical challenge is China. Okay. Russia is a geopolitical spoiler in Europe, but Russia is a declining society. China is a rising society. It's clear now that Russia is subordinate. It's a client state. It's a vassal state of China. So I agree we should focus on China. And that's exactly why I think the Americans should put more pressure on Putin to get a quick end to the war in Ukraine, and then the Europeans and the Americans could join forces in countering the real global challenge, namely China.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem to be exactly what's happening. You were on record not too long ago with our sister publication, Welt, and you used the word disintegration, talking about NATO. I just wonder if you could give us a little bit more detail about why you see that happening. What's going on? How is NATO disintegrating?
Basically because the American president has raised doubts about his commitment to Europe, to European security, and his commitment to Article 5, the article in the NATO treaty that states we consider an attack on one an attack on all. And in the same moment that the biggest and strongest ally of NATO raises doubts about his commitment to Article 5, then you are weakening the alliance politically. And on top of that, when you threaten another ally to take territory by force, like Greenland, right, then you are weakening the alliance. So again, Putin may be laughing. And I'm asking myself the question, why is it that Trump is so fascinated by Putin? Why is it that he always adopts the speaking lines of Putin while he's putting pressure on President Zelensky of Ukraine and the Europeans? I don't understand it. There's no strategy. It's not logic, in my opinion, and it doesn't serve the interests of the U.S.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we could add to that list. There are measures to lift sanctions on Russian oil as well. But I want to come back to, we'll come back to Greenland because that's also a live issue. But I want to ask from someone who's been inside NATO or has led NATO, there's a lot of talk about Europeanizing the alliance. I want to ask you, how would that work in practice? Because how can you Europeanize an alliance where you still have the top military commander being an American, the SACEUR, and the decisions being based on consensus around the table? Is it a real, is that a viable concept to Europeanize NATO, or do we need something different, a whole different structure?
We don't need a different structure, and I consider NATO a cornerstone of European security, and it will remain so. But we have to Europeanize NATO by taking over more positions in leading military command roles, and we have started that process. I think it makes sense to keep the Supreme Allied Commander an American, taking into account that the ultimate security guarantee for Europe is the American nuclear umbrella. Right. And I have no doubt that kind of deterrence will remain. Mm-hmm. So I think SACEUR, the Supreme Allied Commander, should still be an American. But under him, I think more posts could be taken over by Europeans. Even more important would be to create a coalition of willing and capable European countries that can do what is necessary in investments and development of military capabilities to defend Europe. And to that coalition of the willing, I also count Ukraine.
Right.
Ukraine is the strongest military power in Europe right now. It's battle-tested. It can contribute to European security. We need Ukraine as a bulwark against an aggressive Russia.
Mm-hmm. And the coalition of the willing, do you see that as like-minded countries investing in the, or do you see something with a real command structure so that if we have a concrete alert, if we have drones going into a European state, that a decision can be made to respond to that among Europeans? Mm-hmm.
Yes, indeed, because at the end of the day, we are dependent on a well-functioning command structure. Mm-hmm. And you have a pretext, a blueprint already. Mm-hmm. Back in 2014, 6 NATO countries created a joint expeditionary force led by the UK, with headquarters in London, Nordic and Baltic states. More could join, and within that expeditionary force, you have a command structure. So I think the perspective would and should be to create an independent European command structure so that we can act without the United States, if need be.
And just so I'm clear, so Joint Expeditionary Force, that's the most mature, the best candidate to sort of deal with European security on that level?
It's the best alternative right now, but I would like to see it further developed. That's why I'm speaking about a coalition of the willing. European countries that are capable and willing to do what is needed. I think there are some conditions to join that coalition of the willing. First, you should be a NATO country or Ukraine, because Ukraine should be allowed into that coalition. you should commit to fulfilling the 5% NATO goal when it comes to defense investments. You should commit to providing security guarantees a la NATO Article 5.
Right.
You should commit to not be able to veto any military operation. And you should accept provisions in the agreement that allows to expel partners in the coalition of willing that do not live up to their commitments or their promises. So it's not a free ride. You have to fulfill certain conditions, and if you don't, you can leave. We have too many hesitant European countries.
Right.
They should not be allowed to hamper European defense.
It's a pretty fleshed out idea there. You're happy with your current job. You wouldn't want to take charge of that in the next role.
Yes, because now I can speak my mind.
Right.
Let's face it, I mean, the Secretary General of NATO has the overall task to maintain the cohesion of the alliance, and to that end, he must please the main stakeholder,
Of course.
and that is the United States. And Secretary General Rutte has to deal with President Trump. I had Obama. They are two different personalities.
Different customers. Still a little bit of diplomacy in you there. But coming back to Ukraine, speaking of Ukraine, we've had some fascinating discussions here with people from Ukraine's defense industry. They talk about how they can help Europe. Do you think that European countries, NATO, are working closely enough with Ukraine? Are they involving Ukraine in their defense readiness as much as they, and if not, how could they do that?
Not as much as they could, but we are improving, actually. One model is called the Danish model because it's inspired by a Danish approach where instead of giving grants, we are investing directly in the Ukrainian defense industry. And in my consultancy, Rasmussen Global, we have several clients in Europe that want to be connected with the Ukrainian defense industry. And we have more and more success stories in that respect. The other way around, you also see Ukrainian defense industries place subsidiaries, production facilities in Western Europe. So it goes both ways, and while we don't do enough right now, we are on the right track. And in particular, when it comes to drones and high-tech military capabilities, the Ukrainians have really shown the way forward, and we can learn a lot from the Ukrainians. And that's also why I think Ukraine belongs to a coalition of the willing, also to expand our defense industrial base.
And yet we've seen some comments, some critical comments about Ukraine's technical prowess from certain captains of industry. Do you think there's a problem with hubris, perhaps, among some defense industry leaders in Europe, sort of not being willing to really extend a hand to Ukrainian partners? Is there a little bit of what's the issue there?
There may be at least two issues. One is mindset. In Europe, we are too focused on what I would call legacy military capabilities to build tanks, airplanes, battleships, all the heavy stuff.
Right.
And it takes 5-10 years from the decisions taken till military capabilities can be delivered. The Ukrainians have taught us that they can do a lot by using drones.
Right.
They hit targets on Russian territory with their drones.
Sure.
And drones are much cheaper to produce and much faster to deliver. So I think we need to change our mindset in the direction of producing high technology military capabilities.
Right.
Then there may be another issue. Very often people are speaking about the risk of corruption in dealing with Ukrainian defense industry. In my opinion, that risk is exaggerated, and I think recent examples show that the Ukrainians are really taking the combat of corruption seriously. And out of the ashes of the war, I think we will see a much, much cleaner Ukrainian society with less corruption and less power to the oligarchs. I appreciate that.
Right, right. And just the other day, we saw a former presidential advisor being put on trial for corruption charges. And some people say, well, look, there's a corruption problem. Other people say that's evidence they're dealing with it and facing up to it. Just on the same theme, how does it make you feel when you see big players like France and Germany having difficulty coming to an agreement about weapon systems, like things? Shouldn't that be sort of in the past now, such disagreements? How does that make you feel when you see?
I feel bad about it, because the European defense industry is too fragmented. We have too many companies, they're too small, they're not competitive. So people are concerned that when we invest much more in defense, it's really purchasing American equipment, because the Europeans are not able to do it and not able to deliver fast enough. So I feel bad about it. We need European defense champions. We need to make it easier to make mergers and acquisitions across borders. We have too much national protectionism when it comes to defense in Europe. Right. On top of that, we have too many weapon systems, too many ammunition systems. We need to rationalize that. And in that respect, I can recommend to follow the suggestions in the Draghi report. That would make it much easier to create a true internal defense market in the European Union.
You mentioned Draghi, and just bring to mind that he's been mentioned as a possible peace envoy, somebody who could speak to Russia, represent Europe's interests in any peace negotiations. I just want to get your comment on that. Do you think there's any value in having a European engage directly with Russians? Because we've seen the U.S. is really distracted and sort of not involved in pushing those peace talks forward at the moment.
At least Draghi would be much better than Gerhard Schröder.
Right.
Putin has suggested Gerhard Schröder as a mediator. I think we need a strong personality that is considered a neutral mediator. So I'm not going into discussion on them. There may be several suitable candidates, but in principle, I agree that it may be the time has come to appoint someone that can deal directly with the Russians, because you're right, the Americans are distracted now, preoccupied by the Iran war, preoccupied by the tensions in the South China Sea, etc. So I think a natural way to fulfill our ambition of a more European NATO and Europeanized security would be to also pursue a diplomatic path more determinedly. So while I was a bit skeptical in the past, I may have changed my mind in the direction of being supportive when it comes to appointing someone.
Really interesting. And there's no shortage of names. We've heard everybody from Draghi to Angela Merkel. In the past few days, I heard former Finnish President Niinisto. I've heard Antonio Costa, the European Council President. Of course, HRVP Kaja Kallas. It's really kind of what they need to do is come to an agreement around the person from the EU leaders.
Yes, and that's one of the weaknesses of European Union. We have too many presidents.
Right.
We need a face, and first and foremost, we need a new mindset. We are still thinking that we are living in peacetime,
Right.
but we are not. And Trump, Putin, Xi Jinping, they don't take us seriously as long as they don't know who is actually representing Europe.
Indeed, indeed. And peacetime mentality, your Prime Minister, I remember, said that a few days ago, and you've come from Copenhagen, from the Copenhagen Democracy Summit. I wanted to use the last few seconds we have here. Are you still concerned about Greenland? Do you think the United States is still focused on taking Greenlandic sovereignty away, or do you think that threat has subsided now?
Trump has not forgotten Greenland, but now he's preoccupied elsewhere in the world. But one day he will revert to that issue. He just sent his special representative to Nuuk in Greenland
Yes.
To participate in a conference.
At the same time as the European was there.
Yeah. So, the bottom line is the following. Fortunately, we are now pursuing a more classical diplomatic path. And I think it would be possible to find a peaceful diplomatic solution to the dispute on Greenland. For instance, we do have an old defense agreement between Denmark and the US allowing the United States to deploy more troops in Greenland if they so wish. Be our guests. We would welcome that. And right now they're discussing the possibility to enlarge the number of American bases in Greenland from the current 1 to 2 or 3, and that's possible. So I think we'll find a solution.
Thank you so much. Great chat. Secretary General Rasmussen, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I think we're supposed to go out this way.
Yeah.